This is my client, Alex Payne. He's a 30-year-old vegan, natural, aka drug-free, classic physique bodybuilding competitor, and I've been coaching him on and off since 2021. Most of you watching this have zero interest in ever stepping on a bodybuilding stage, and that's okay. It's not for everybody. In fact, I would say it's not for 99% of people, and for very good reasons. But if I had $1 for every person who came to us and said, I don't want to compete, but I'd like to look like I could, I'd have a lot of dollars. Regardless of whether you want to build some muscle, look leaner, or feel a little bit more comfortable in your swimsuit, bodybuilding is an interesting place to look. But before I go further, if you're a vegan who's interested in any of those things, be sure to hit subscribe because we do put out new videos every week with recipes, meal plans, tips, tricks, and educational videos. Nobody on earth has mastered their physiques in the way that competitive bodybuilders have, so it makes sense that we look to them to learn. But what is actually worth copying from competitive bodybuilders, and what is a little bit too risky? Today we're going to be using Alex as an example of what we should and shouldn't copy from competitive bodybuilders when we just want to improve our current body composition. Of the 5 coaches at Vegan Proteins online coaching, 4 of us have been or are competitive bodybuilders. And it's actually how we got started in coaching way back in 2008. And although a lot has changed since then, and we now coach vegans of all different levels and goals, we do still have a reputation for helping people create jaw-dropping transformations, whether they end up on the stage or not. So let's dive into what makes for a successful transformation for everyone and what should just be left to the competitors. So Alex was always athletic. He played hockey as a kid, football in high school, and rugby in college. But he was also dealing with a very real condition called Osgood-Schlader's disease, which is a bone disease that happens in kids. And it was causing him a lot of knee pain that was being made worse by the fact that he was around 235, 240 pounds. A doctor suggested to him that losing weight would help with that pain, so that's what kind of set this off in the first place. It actually had nothing to do with what he looked like and more to do with lessening the pain in his knee that he was dealing with. The much bigger change happened when his then girlfriend, now wife, also named Alex, interestingly enough, showed him the vegan documentary called Game Changers on one of their first dates, which I think was a very bold move. Well done, Alex. I should specify. Well done, girl Alex. And boy Alex went vegan the very next day.
I didn't go vegan until I met my now wife. She was my girlfriend at the time. Literally all she had to do was show me, the now famous documentary Game Changers on Netflix. And really all it took was that, and it just set me over the edge. Because I always had that gnawing sense of something is wrong with the way we distribute food and we go about getting our calories in the system. It's there was always just a deep sense of ingrained inequality that was just very clear to me. It wasn't until it was kind of presented to me in the fashion of hey, this is something you can do that's great for the planet, great for the animals, obviously, and also good for your health as well. Physical positives we get from embracing a plant-based diet. And that was something Game Changers, the documentary, really got into.
But what pulled Alex towards competitive bodybuilding actually had nothing to do with his diet initially. It had to do with what happened to his lifts. Like many people, there was a part of Alex that felt like when he went vegan, he was going to lose strength across the board in the gym and probably lose muscle. But after 8 months of eating a fully vegan diet, what he found was that his squat, his bench, and his deadlift had all gone up in the gym and that he had actually gained muscle. And that surprised him enough to make him feel like maybe stepping on stage would be a good form of advocacy to show other people that it was possible too.
I always was trying to find something that kind of like a sport that kind of, went with my body type, and something that I really just felt like I was really firing on all cylinders, using what was given to me at birth in like the most efficient way possible. And I really didn't feel like I found that until bodybuilding. And honestly, I really didn't have any interest in bodybuilding until I went vegan.
So by the time Alex and I met in 2021, he knew he wanted to compete on a bodybuilding stage, but he didn't know a lot about the sport specifically. And I could see that there were a lot of areas that we were going to need to build up. And that's exactly what we did for a full year. We spent time in a surplus, focusing on building up specific areas that he would need for his category, like back, chest, and delts. And only after that, nearly a year later, did we actually officially start on his competition prep, which is the dieting phase for a bodybuilding show. He had a very successful first season. He actually placed first in his very first show, which was super cool. I got to be there for that, which is not always the case with all my clients. And after a 2-year off season, we just did it again in 2026. So that's the headline version of what happened. But the interesting part isn't just the visual transformation, although that is very cool to look at. It's a lot more about what happens behind the scenes that is where we see the magic happen, and that's the part that a lot of people don't know much about. The interesting part is what happens when you're at home, not when you're at the gym, when no one's watching, the amount of detail and effort and energy that you have to put into the sport. It's also about the areas where Alex's inclination would be to push too hard, and those were the areas where I actually had to hold him back for his own good. So let's actually define this, because most people only have a vague idea of what competitive bodybuilding actually is, and there are a lot of misconceptions. Bodybuilding at its core is the sport or art, depending on who you ask, there is some controversy about this out there, of training and eating in a specific way to change the way that your body looks. So it's building muscle in specific areas to create desired shapes and losing body fat enough to be able to expose that muscle. That is the whole sport. There is no game, there is no clock, there is no ball. Now, competitive bodybuilding takes this same concept and brings it to the full extreme of what the body is capable of. And then it puts that body on a stage in front of judges who are going to compare you to everybody else on that stage on that same day at that same time. There is no real on-stage performance of strength or skill. Show day is where you display the work that you've put in for the last 9 months to several years. But you're not actually doing any work necessarily on that day other than posing. It's a very extreme sport, like most sports taken to the high level, and I think most bodybuilders would tell you that it's not actually very healthy, and that's why that peak stage look is very temporary and only there for the time that they're actually competing. There are different divisions too. Classic physique, which is what Alex competes in, rewards a more aesthetic, old school bodybuilding look, and other divisions reward mass or conditioning above almost anything else. And of course, the women's divisions are completely different and reward different shapes, muscularity, and degrees of conditioning. Alex is also a natural athlete, like all of our clients, which means he uses no performance-enhancing drugs, and he specifically competes in natural organizations where they are both polygraph tested and drug tested if they win. And being a natural competitor does change the entire timeline of what's realistic and how long it takes to get there.
One thing that surprised me the most about competitive bodybuilding, I want to say just like all of the planning that goes into it and all of like the behind the scenes stuff you might not realize. And I don't mean to say this to dissuade anybody from starting a season themselves. I absolutely think it's something that if you have the motivation, it is an incredibly fulfilling process. However, layperson exposed to bodybuilding, they see, like Arnold, the most of what they see is like movie stars of the action movies from the 80s, like all just like the muscly guys, like just all just looking like just absolute Greek gods. And like, how do I put this? Smart isn't the right word, but just like how knowledgeable you need to be to get to that point. People don't really realize. They kind of just think these guys are like meatheads, and like they're just like, oh, just point me in the right direction, I'll lift. Yes, of course you can just like lift heavy, eat a lot of protein, and like you're gonna have results. But when you're lifting and competing at such a high level, you really have to be efficient with like and make sure you're getting the most out of like every single calorie, every single macronutrient that goes, every single gram of everything that goes into your body.
Now let's talk about non-competitive bodybuilding, which is something most of you watching this are probably interested in. A lot of people think in order to be a bodybuilder, you have to step on stage. I hard disagree. Bodybuilding is just what we talked about at the beginning, eating and training in a way to change the way that your body looks. If that's what you're doing, then you are bodybuilding, my friend. So non-competitive bodybuilding is the same process, but it does not end on the stage, and it's usually taken to a much less extreme level of leanness. But the training principles and nutrition are more or less the same. Most people who come to us and say they want to look like they could compete are actually talking about this version. They want the muscle, they want the leanness, but they don't want the tan or the posing routine or the strangers judging them in their tiny little swimsuit. And it's also worth noting that most people who do eventually compete have been living a non-competitive bodybuilding lifestyle for many years before they ever decide to make that decision. That's the entire point of this video. You can take most of what works about this sport and leave the stage out of it completely. But before we get into what to steal, there are a few things that competitive bodybuilders do that you should not copy. And I want to talk about those things first. Competitive bodybuilding is an extreme sport, pushing the body to get as lean as humanly possible, which is usually well below what is considered healthy. And because of that, many of the tactics that competitive bodybuilders use should not be used by those not entering into the sport. Some of the sport only makes sense if you are actively trying to step on stage, and if you're more of a lifestyle bodybuilder, then a lot of the tactics they use will end up working against you in the long term. First, there's the volume of cardio that competitive bodybuilders have to do. Many competitors do long cardio sessions almost every day per week leading up into a competition. And many of them actually do 2 sessions per day. And that's in addition to their lifting. Because of Alex's excellent prep setup, we actually only got up to about 45 minutes of cardio per day, 5 days a week, which is pretty good for somebody that's in a category that's as conditioned as he is. But not everybody is that lucky, even if their prep is set up super duper well. And did I mention that at this point, most people doing this are basically at near essential levels of body fat? It's rough. It's not a fat loss strategy for a normal person. It's simply a short-term tool to hit a specific look on a specific day. And it does come with a real cost to energy, recovery, and muscle retention. And don't even get me started on the toll that it can take on your mood. And most people are just not willing to give those things up in order to achieve a particular physique, especially if it's one that they want to keep for the long term.
One thing I do want people who aren't doing competitive bodybuilding to not freak out as much over is like the little changes in your physique day to day. As a competitive bodybuilder, even if you're just, doing an amateur show or whatever, it's very easy to just like get hung up over like little things like, your abdomen one day might be looking a little bloated. Like you might think you're carrying a little bit more weight in like your lower back. And that's something we would talk about a lot, Danny, like at the end of my bodybuilding seasons, like that was like always the last place you're trying to lose weight from. And that was something that like, you had like pictures on your phone of like zeroing in on different parts of my body. Like, oh, like we're looking a little flat here. Or like, this part, like we could bring this up a little bit. And like, that sort of like, very, detailed, that sort of look at things is advantageous, obviously, as a bodybuilder. But I would say if you're doing that just as a layperson, just as somebody just like looking to get into shape, like that's how you develop body dysmorphia or an eating disorder. That's how you go down like a very dark road and don't want to do that. Yeah, I would say just like give yourself grace, especially if you're just starting out.
Secondly, competitive bodybuilders' calories tend to get quite low. Again, the setup of the prep is key, but energy needs are relative to that particular person. And what I mean by that is somebody could be eating 1,500 calories per day and feel very full, Somebody could be eating 1,500 calories per day and feel starving, and all the different numbers you can think of. So hunger is very relative to that person. So while it may sound, quote, not so bad that we didn't have to bring Alex below 1,900 calories at any point during his prep, consider that his normal maintenance calories are closer to 3,400, which makes you realize that he was actually only eating about 55% of the calories that he started with by the end of prep. And that's with lifting and cardio. So while it can be very tempting to see a beautiful bikini competitor eating 1,100 calories per day and think I should copy it in order to achieve the same look, you're not seeing the whole picture, and it is really a fast track to health problems. Third, and maybe most importantly, is the mental side of prep. Competitive bodybuilding is basically just competitive dieting with weightlifting added in, and it goes on for months, and it takes a real toll mentally. Food can very easily become a full-blown obsession. Neuroses is at an all-time high. Most social events become a non-negotiable no at some point, and it is very easy to become a bit of a hermit. And that's a trade-off that most competitors are willing to accept because they've chosen to chase a specific goal. And that is definitely not something that you should be signing up for just so that you can feel like you look better at the beach. Well, there are definitely other things that competitive bodybuilders do that I think you should probably not do. And we're not even talking about the steroid side of things. Hopefully that goes without saying, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Don't. I'm gonna leave this list here for now so that we can get into some of the fun stuff. Because like I said at the beginning, competitive bodybuilders have mastered changing their physique in a way that most people have not. So there's a lot that we can actually learn from them, even if we're taking like a bodybuilding light version of it. So what are those things? Let's talk about them. Lesson number 1, not program hopping. Alex ran the same core training program for basically a straight year. And while there were some changes here and there over that time, we did not do a new split every time he saw something on Instagram. The same program run long enough to actually see what it does and long enough to actually have the neurological and muscular adaptations to make progress on those movements, that's where it's at.
These days we are assaulted on all ends by so many different fitness influencers, stuff we see online, stuff we see on TV, so many different workouts, so many different approaches, even just like you got CrossFit, you got bodybuilding, you got all these different events you can compete in. It's really hard to kind of just like stick to one thing because we're always like, especially when you're starting out and you don't know what you like, what you don't like, what's effective, what's not effective. It's easy to get distracted and not stick with one thing. But I think the body of exercise science research, like what we know now, really points to just being consistent. And it's not sexy doing the same workouts and just progressive overload, not lifting the same weight all the time, also not lifting crazy different weights all the time. Just remember to not get distracted by all the other shit happening. Just like other people in the gym, like it's like, oh, I want to just try out that workout. Like, oh, what's that for? What's that for? Like he's jacked, like he looks good, I want to look like him. And it's like, well, his workout could be made by his coach, and he could be working around like a shoulder injury or something. He could have very specific, a training protocol that he's following.
Most people switch programs the second that they get bored or the second that they think that progress is slowing, and that's usually right before the real adaptations actually are about to happen. Real strength and real muscle gain actually show up in the plateaus that you break through, not the ones that you avoid by always switching to something new. Especially when you're cutting, every time you change your program significantly, you're at risk of losing muscle while you adapt to a new phase. Boring though it may be, if you have a solid program, stick to it longer than you think. And consider changing one thing at a time rather than overhauling the whole program. This is one of the first things that I coach my new clients in, is that we're probably going to be doing this program longer than you expect. And I understand that program hopping feels like progress, but it's actually just avoidance. Lesson 2, going long stretches without being in a caloric deficit. Before his first prep, Alex and I spent an entire year in a surplus. And between his first prep and his second prep, he spent just over 2 years in a calorie surplus. Now that is time deliberately spent not trying to lose weight. There are no random diets, there are no random mini cuts, and I also want to add that this wasn't just a free-for-all surplus where the scale was just climbing indefinitely. It was a small surplus that put us in a deliberate build.
Yeah, so is it hard to not diet in between seasons? I wish I could give you just like a very straight answer on this one, but I kind of want to cop out and say yes and no. Or part of my mind tells me it shouldn't matter, but also the other part, like kind of like the devil and the angel on your shoulder, like one's like, oh, you shouldn't be losing weight. It's like, no, you need to get bigger. And if you try to do both of those things at the same time, a lot of the time I feel like you're kind of just spinning your wheels. So yes, it's important to have a plan and stick to it and have a defined idea of where you want to be at, like whether it's gain muscle, lose weight, at the end of whatever, training cycle you're in.
And that is the opposite of how most people approach getting in shape. They want to lose the weight first and then build the muscle later. And if you've watched my videos for long enough, you know that I feel like that is if you are questioning which order you should be doing these things in, build muscle at maintenance first and then lose the body fat later. Competitive bodybuilders build muscle first and lose the body fat later. Why? Because you can't diet muscle onto your body. You can only diet body fat off of muscle you already built. And if you don't have a lot of muscle built and you don't have the healthy habits built to know how to keep that muscle that you have, if you just go straight into a deficit because you think you're going to expose all of this muscle underneath that you haven't actually spent time building yet, one, what little muscle you have, you're gonna accidentally diet away. Two, you're gonna get to the goal weight and realize you don't have nearly the muscle that you thought that you had. But it's frustrating. Nobody wants to feel fluffier than they're comfortable feeling any longer than they have to feel it. However, if you are willing to do this for a period of time, I'd say at least 6 months, before you decide to start actively going into a deficit, you are probably going to have a better outcome. Building muscle, especially as a drug-free person, takes longer than it feels like it should take. However long you think it's gonna take you to build that muscle, double it, and you're still gonna have to do everything perfect to make it happen. Lesson number 3, tracking your food. So Alex tracks his nutrition with more precision than almost anybody that I coach, both in a cut and in a build. And while I don't think everybody needs to be as precise as a competitive bodybuilder, or certainly not as much as Alex, tracking closely for a period of time teaches you things that estimating your portions and guessing how much you're taking in never ever will. I cannot stress this enough. If you are somebody who, quote, feels like you're doing everything right, but you're not getting the results you want, and you're not tracking your intake, then you simply do not actually know if you're doing everything right. I'm sorry to be the one to say that, but it's true.
Why did I track in the off season? Why did I track my calories? I think it really just came down to just like my need to know and just like me craving consistency. At the end of the day, I think the first part of my life, just having absolutely no idea about nutrition at all, which most people don't. Why would we? It's not really taught in school. No one knows even what the 3 main macronutrients are, let alone what kinds of foods are high in certain. I mean, everyone knows meat has protein, of course, but like, do people really know how many grams of fat are in a single serving of peanut butter and how much of that fat a normal adult should be having in one day? Do people even know how much a single serving of peanut butter is, like what it looks like? Probably not if you ever weighed it on a scale. I think most people that haven't, if they weighed peanut butter out on a scale, they'd be like, holy shit, I've been eating 3 servings my whole life and I thought that was normal.
But here's the line though. Tracking your food precisely is a tool for learning. It's not a permanent identity, or it shouldn't be at least. I'm not suggesting that everyone needs to track food forever, or even that you need to track in order to see results, but I am saying you will get results when you are tracking your food. So there are ways to get results without tracking your food, but when you are tracking your food, you know why you're getting results. It's kind of like If you think about it this way, if you have a budget, you can spend under budget without tracking your spending, right? Like, it's possible, but you will spend under budget if you are tracking your spending, and you'll know why and how, and hopefully you'll learn something from that process and take it into the future. And hey, maybe one day you won't need to track all your spending, right? It's the same thing here.
What surprised me the most tracking, during prep and during the off season, just like how much normal people don't know about their food and what goes into it. And I don't mean to like admonish, a normal person, because it's not their fault. I mean, I had no idea, but if you actually like take the time to learn about the effects certain food has in your body, or like just pay attention to how it makes you feel physically after you have it, and then like compare that with like how you feel after you have like something that's more like based on whole foods and more plant forward. Just paying attention to those little things, I think inevitably a light bulb goes off, and it becomes really hard to go back to what you were doing because it just doesn't feel good anymore.
So here's what I'd say about this one. Take the lesson, but not the obsession. Track long enough to recalibrate your eye, then let the precision loosen once it's done its job. Lesson number 4, ditching the bodybuilding myths. There's a myth that in order to get lean, you need to change your weight training routine to doing more lightweight, high reps in order to, quote, tone or define the muscle. Well, Alex certainly didn't do that, and none of our clients ever do that, and I definitely don't recommend it. What builds muscle will keep muscle. Remember that. He kept lifting heavy all the way through prep because building or maintaining muscle requires the same stimulus whether you are gaining or losing. Yes, as you lose weight, lifting heavy may get a little bit lighter than where you started, but you should always be aiming to lift as heavy as you can in your given rep range. A couple of other myths worth killing while we're here right now. One is that fasted cardio burns more fat. It doesn't meaningfully change fat loss over the course of a full day. So the confusion here is that while you are actually doing the fasted cardio, more of the calories you are burning are coming from fat versus carbohydrates, but that has nothing to do with your actual body fat in that moment. What matters is the overall caloric burn over the course of a day. And if anything, you're probably gonna burn fewer calories during fasted cardio because you're fasted and therefore not as energetic, like by definition. Another myth would be that you need to do isolation movements and like burnout style circuits, drop sets, supersets, giant sets, etc. in order to gain definition in the muscle, and that's more effective than compound movements. Definition is just body fat percentage that's low enough to reveal the muscle that you have. So there's definitely a place in bodybuilding for isolation movements, absolutely. Supersets, giant sets, there's a time and a place for them, but please don't think just because they're isolations or because they're supersets and giant sets that they're more effective at burning fat than compound lifts. Weightlifting is actually not effective for burning fat at all. That's not why we do it. We do it to build the muscle. The diet and the cardio, that's where the definition is gonna come from. Lesson number 5, refeed days. So Alex used refeed days throughout his whole prep, and I use them heavily with pretty much all of my fat loss clients, whether they're competing in bodybuilding or just looking to lose body fat. And those are basically scheduled days with higher carbohydrate intake, not putting you in a surplus, but putting you back at maintenance for a couple of days. So it's not a cheat day, and it's not about willpower or reward. It is a tool to help us, one, be more compliant. It's a lot easier to stick to the deficit Monday through Friday when we know that we have slightly higher refeed days on Saturday and Sunday. It also helps give us a little bit of energy boost because, like I've mentioned, competition prep and hardcore dieting is exhausting, and this helps mitigate that a little bit. Refeeds can help with training performance. They might help with hormone regulation during dieting. They can help with sleep, and honestly, just the mental grind of a deficit is pretty grueling, and a long diet without a single break for most people is going to be a recipe for failure at some point. Refeed days, big fan. Utilize them with all of my bodybuilding clients. This is one of the easiest things that you can steal, even if you don't consider yourself a bodybuilder. If you're on a fat loss journey, you can have deficit days. And if you don't like calling them refeed days because it signals like cheat in your mind, you can call them maintenance days, deficit days and maintenance days. And you'll still overall be in a deficit, but you'll probably be more compliant and therefore it'll probably work better. Lesson number 6, consistency year long. This is the last one, and honestly it's the one that like ties everything together here. Alex does not go feral in the off season. Once the bodybuilding prep is over, he doesn't go nuts, and many people at the end of a diet will do exactly that. So what is very important is, no, you don't have to be as strict, and certainly the calories will be higher, the cardio will be less, but you still want to be consistent with the healthy habits that you've had all the way through prep. So keeping the training nice and consistent, making sure that you're still eating lots of healthy foods and you know how much you're eating, at least until you feel like you're fully out of the woods with the diet. And if you've ever done a long diet, then you know what I'm talking about. For Alex, training stays consistent year round. Cardio doesn't disappear completely. Tracking precision may loosen, but it doesn't vanish entirely. He still has a rough sense of what he's eating, even when he's not tracking every single gram. And this, for those of you who are interested in competitive bodybuilding, this is the difference between someone who competes once and disappears and somebody who is able to compete year over year and decades over decades. And these are the people that you see on stage in their 70s when you go to these bodybuilding shows. They've found a way to take what works and incorporate it into their regular life while staying super healthy. So in my opinion, bodybuilding, competitive or non-competitive, it's really not about how hard you can push in the 12, 16, 24 weeks leading up to your end goal. It's about how much consistency can you bring to the table when there isn't an immediate goal? What are you still doing when nobody's looking, when there isn't a deadline? How many healthy habits have you habituated into just your daily routine? This is what's going to make a great bodybuilder, lifestyle, or competitive. So that's it, guys. That's the video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I know, like I said at the beginning, most of you do not give a hoot about competitive bodybuilding, but you are interested in building muscle, getting a little leaner, being a little fitter, feeling a little better, and a lot of this stuff applies. But it's also good to know what shouldn't apply to you. So hopefully this video was helpful. Was there anything you feel like I missed? Anything that you're interested in hearing? Any nice words you want to leave for Alex? Please write them down below. He kicked ass this year. And what do you guys think of these kinds of videos, sort of like case study videos of some of the clients that we've worked with? Let me know. That could be something fun that we do in the future. Let me know what you guys think about it. And if this has piqued your interest and you are interested in learning a little bit more about what we do, how we coach people. So like I said, we started back in 2008 coaching competitive bodybuilders, specifically vegan bodybuilders, but now we coach vegans of all different levels, all different ages, all different goals that want to build muscle and get leaner. I'll leave an assessment down below. You can fill that out. 𝐬𝐿𝐫 will get back to you. We would love to be a part of your journey and help you get in the best shape of your life. So if you liked the video, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, hit the bell, all the things I'm supposed to tell you to do at the end of a YouTube video, and we will talk to you soon.